what a better way to step into the next session for us than to invite a longtime user, a friend, and another expert in the streaming world. If you haven't read Yaroslav's newsletter on streaming, you're missing out. He is a great author and just a phenomenal writer and thinker. I think from a very practical perspective with some of his experience with just about every imaginable streaming technology in the world. So with that, would love to welcome to the stage Yaroslav Tkachenko. Hopefully I'm saying your last name correctly.
Yes.
Yaroslav, welcome. Jazz to have you. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting. It's a pleasure to be here. And today, I'm hoping to make a few predictions about the future, and we'll see how they will work out. So just a few words about myself. I've been in this data streaming space for about 7 years. Until recently, I was a founding engineer at GoldSky, where we built a streaming data platform for decentralized data sets. Before that, I worked on a lot of data streaming technologies at Shopify, where we powered different e-commerce experiences with streaming. And before that, I was a software architect at Activision, working on a data platform for Call of Duty games. And so, as I said, today I want to make a few predictions about the future of data streaming. And my first prediction is that in the future, data streaming is ubiquitous. And just before I zoom in, I want to mention a few sort of interesting new trends, some new requirements that I observed in the last few years. And the first one is what I call user-facing data products. So it's something that historically only big tech companies have been building. But now you see this being adopted in more and more companies all over the world. And so this idea that you've been accumulating all this data into data lakes and data warehouses, and it's been mostly used for internal reporting, analytics, and machine learning. Now you can actually use this data to power real user experiences, right? So putting it in front of your end users, and that also means different reliability expectations, of course, because now your APIs, your user-facing databases, they need to be designed to actually be used in this fashion, and also different availability expectations. Also, it's really hard to not mention, Gen AI and LLMs. In the past few years, we've just seen this crazy adoption of these new technologies, and when people try to actually use them in an enterprise setup, they quickly realized you need to have fresh, personalized data to really have really good results with Gen AI. And it's the same as data products, actually. And it's something that data streaming offers you in this case. And finally, I want to mention efficiency and also cost efficiency. We are at the end of what's called zero interest rates period, and you see all this unfortunate news about companies doing rounds of layoffs, and that potentially means reduced headcount, and you just need to be able to build and deliver potentially the same system with fewer resources. So all of these are really interesting, and I want to really zoom in into data products first. So historically, this has been very challenging because you have your operational data plane, your typical relational data that's sitting in your, MySQL, Postgres, Oracle, some kind of OLTP store, and then you have your analytical data plane where you have your, data scientists and data engineers populating data lakes, data warehouses, building some kind of reporting analytics, and typically you use a pipeline in the middle, and as you can see, these are two very separate entities, right? Organizationally, they could be separate departments, maybe reporting to different leads. And historically, again, it's been challenging to really work seamlessly across these planes. And so when you want to build something that's user-facing, but also have this qualities of using your internal data lakes or data warehouses, you kind of have to bridge these worlds. And you've probably seen this shifting left, methodology. And this is my favorite phrase about this: shift and left to make it right. So basically, it just means whenever you want to build something that is a user-facing data product, you want to move some of the workflows that you have on the right to the left. So you kind of mix those operational and analytical worlds a little bit. And the end goal is really to achieve to something like this, where you have your operational data plane and analytical data plane working together, and you have those sort of vertical domain slices where maybe you embed your your data scientists or data engineers into product teams, or vice versa. Maybe you just make it so easy to use those internal data lakes or topics in your streaming platform. And so the end goal is really unifying those two. And what you also notice is that any kind of user-facing experience is about user perception and latency, right? So you want to make sure that the data that you use and show to your customers, it's actually relevant. And so what I think is going to happen is when people try to build more of these data products, when they try to unlock more of these internal data sets, they'll quickly realize that streaming is a key, because you want to be serving fresh, personalized results. And so that's what I mean by data streaming is ubiquitous, because these data products, they're gonna basically power any kind of aspect of an organization in the future. And so you might ask, why are we not there yet, right? And I think there are a few reasons, right? On the technical side, change data capture is a very important technology for you to leverage in this case, right? Because you want to extract a lot of the data from your operational data stores. And it's just been historically hard, but nowadays with tools like Debezium and some other managed tools, it's just becoming more and more feasible to build. This is also an organizational problem, of course, because you have different teams, different departments interacting, and sometimes priorities shift. Maybe you don't give enough importance. You don't realize how important that end data product is, and it's just something that people need to recognize and sort of build the organization in the right way in this case. And finally, it's also important to mention just the maturity of the data stack that we have, right? In the past few years, we've seen amazing tools like DuckDB that they've been adopted, but at the same time, the end-to-end data platform or building end-to-end data products is still quite challenging, because you need to mix a lot of these tools together. You need to combine a lot of these data products together, and so that's why I think in the future as well, data streaming is unified, right? And I actually wrote this post last year called Data Platforms in 2030. It looks like I like making predictions. And so in that post, I sort of hinted at this idea that in the future, we'll have a streaming log or streaming platform like Kafka, Redpanda, a Lakehouse API like Iceberg, and maybe also even an all-up database like ClickHouse, more tightly integrated to the point where you consider it to be one sort of logical piece of infrastructure. And right now, we can definitely use all of them together, right? You can mix it up, but you still need to manage three very separate things, and you need to reconcile, and you need to build a lot of integrations. And so I hope in the future that is something that's not going to be the case. And this is already happening, right? So it might happen faster than 2030. With all these recent announcements, the Iceberg or Lakehouse API is definitely getting more adoption. And as Alex mentioned, it's already available in Redpanda, for example. So, and this is a really big deal. And I'm not going to repeat, Tyler's stream stable duality, but I want to look into this from more of an operational perspective, right? Because when you have a Lakehouse API that's tightly integrated with your streaming platform, suddenly very tricky, very heavy processes like doing backfills, doing data reprocessing, correcting data, they become much easier, right? Because you can consume data from that API instead of going back to the beginning of the Kafka topic, right? And you also need to have infinite retention in this case. And it also allows you to not build a lot of these data archival tools. You just literally connect to that Iceberg API, and you can get access to the data very quickly. And so this is quite powerful. And if you can do that with Iceberg, you just fall back to a streaming platform like Redpanda for everything else. So I hope that's going to be the way we build data platforms soon. That also means that potentially stateful stream processing is changing. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I highly recommend checking out this Apache Flink flip that sort of changes the way you think about state and stream processing. And finally, it's not just about storage, right? Because the processing aspect itself is very important when it comes to having unified experience. And we still argue between batch and streaming nowadays. But I think in the future, we'll just have a single unified data processing layer. And potentially we'll have streaming or incremental semantics by default, hopefully. And then we just fall back to batch whenever we need to do some of those more like operational things, or maybe for historical queries. And the interface for that, I think, is still SQL, right? SQL is not going anywhere. SQL has been around for decades, and already different engines like Flink and Spark, they allow you to write SQL once and run it in streaming and batch scenarios. But I want to mention this one interesting thing that people don't realize, that SQL is still being evolved quite a bit, and so there's this new feature called polymorphic table functions. That I think came out a few years ago in the SQL spec, and it's already been adopted in Apache Flink community. And so this polymorphic table function allows you to write a function, let's say in Java, where you have access to low-level primitives like state and timers, and then you can integrate it back into your streaming environment, SQL environment, with a syntax like this. So in this case, we have a custom aggregation. And this is quite powerful. I think that's why SQL has still been sort of evolved and adopted to this world of unified batch and streaming. And finally, I want to say that in the future, data streaming is efficient. And I want to cover a few different dimensions here, right? So the first one is cloud storage is just everywhere nowadays. Cloud storage like S3 or GCS. You see new databases, analytical and transactional, that come out every day. Vector databases, key value databases. They all start using cloud storage as their primary and only storage. And you also see this in in streaming frameworks. For example, disaggregated storage in Flink 2.0. That is one of the big features that Apache Flink community is really excited about. And this is not just about the cost, right? Of course, cloud storage is cheap, but it also enables you to build interesting architectural features, like you have this compute storage separation, or you can have access to primitives like conditional writes, which allow you to really shrink the amount of metadata you need to store. So all of that is really advancing the field. And of course, streaming platforms like Redpanda also noticed this, and in the past few years there've been a lot of excitement around this, and we have cloud topics in Redpanda, we have WarpStream, we have some other products as well actively adopting this. And my final observation here is it's hard to ignore this new wave of data infrastructure tools. I'm talking about Arrow, Data Fusion, Velox, DuckDB, of course. And a lot of these tools now, they focus on modularity, composability, and efficiency. And I highly recommend checking out this paper that's called Composable Data Management System Manifesto. So it's actually written by authors of some of those technologies. And the idea here is to build something that's highly composable, very efficient. Obviously, you see Rust and C++ everywhere now. You may ask, like, why is this important in the context of streaming? So yes, all of these tools, or most of these tools now, they used in the batch or analytical scenario, but you already see the adoption. It started. So there are a few products right now that use Arrow and Data Fusion, and they are essentially streaming engines built on this technology. So I think this is coming. It's very interesting to see where the industry is going, and I highly recommend checking out these tools. That's it on my side. Thank you so much for listening, and happy to connect with everyone offline. And now I think I welcome Alex back to the stage.
Slava, that was awesome. I don't know if I guess you couldn't see me when you were presenting, but if you can imagine me in your recent rock concerts that you're doing, I was like, sort of like bobbing my head up and down. Yes, exactly. That's what I'm talking about. Great to have you here. I love this idea that you mentioned there on like the domain slices. But before that, I just want to make a note. In 2019, when I was writing this thing in C++, people, you wouldn't believe the amount of pushback there. Like, what are you doing? Anyway, it's great to see. Let's talk about this idea of vertical slices. I think it's just super interesting for the rest of the world to hear, because I would say you are on the cutting edge of users and early adopters. Perhaps, I don't know, you like pain of testing out early technologies, but I think that the world is catching up to the way that you have used this technology. So this unified, like, hey, maybe tell us a little bit more about that vision where, okay, you have the log, you have the lake house, you have an all up engine. It's sort of all mixed in. I feel like if I take that and then I replicate it, that is like the vertical slice domain that you were thinking about. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, a table, a topic would be like a log, and then you can query it with whatever, let's say like ClickHouse or Snowflake or others, and then you have your Lakehouse API. Is that how you're thinking about? Maybe share a little bit more about that.
Sure, and yes, it can be considered bleeding edge, but to be honest, I've heard shifting left so many times in the past year that I think this is finally happening, right? And so the way to think about this is, yes, you have those abstractions like streams and tables, and those are your building blocks, and it's important to model the data from the domain-driven design principles. And I still think there's a lot we can learn from domain-driven design. And so let's say you take bigger organization, and you have different types of data, you have different, departments, and if you model the data right, in a way where your domains are separated, right, you have good isolation, you have teams actually responsible for serving data in the right format, and the schema evolution is handled, then whenever you build a new product, you basically have access to this catalog of things, and you can mix and match those, right? And you basically want to make sure your streaming representation of data is reliable enough by using schemas, by using discoverability, metadata, documentation, and you just need to connect it to a serving layer in this case, right? Which could be like a ClickHouse or NoSQL database or something else where you just expose that to the end users, and that's kind of how you stack things, right?
And why? And then like the last thought that I think it was really subtle, maybe not so subtle, but why does change data capture makes the clock tick? There was like something there that was really critical that I just want to double click for the audience as we wrap up kind of this session. Is like change data capture makes this concept tick, and to me that was it. As I was listening to your talk, I was like that's it. That is the piece, because in many ways for me, as I heard you say that, like you need these lookup tables, and how do you get that? So what's I don't know if you have any thoughts on like.
Yeah, so essentially, change data capture allows you to represent your typical operational entities. Like you have users, you have transactions, sales, products, whatever. The classic e-commerce example. It allows you to represent them not just as tables sitting in your, MySQL or Postgres database, but as data streams that are evolving. And thanks to the Kafka APIs, you can access those data streams in so many ways, right? You can build different consumers and stream processing applications that can leverage it. And so CDC allows you to think about data as not just static data that's sitting in a database, but actually live evolving data.
Right. It's like the evolving from a point in time query to actually modeling the businesses. And what I've seen, I think, in practice is when people adopt this like the triggers. Like it is hard to imagine user experiences where the only tool you have is querying data address. But as soon as you get this like dynamism, you're like, oh, I could send you an email. By the way, you exceeded your credit card threshold, or many things like, hey, did you know this transaction happened, or did you know?
Funny, one of my very first exposures to stream processing was cart abandonment notifications, actually. many years ago. Yes, and it's exactly that, right? Because you can essentially listen to a bunch of events, coming from the website, coming from maybe a database. You can actually build, sessionization and model those cart abandonment features, which actually, ended up making a lot of money, to be honest. So yeah, it's quite powerful.
Oh man, I love to hear from you. Would love to stay on chat for the next 4 hours. For me, this is so much fun to just get to invite friends and hang out today. And hopefully, if you're in the audience, if you have questions for Yaroslav, he's a lovely human. He's a world expert at this. He's seen and has had practice in building the systems multiple times. So if you're getting in, don't wait. Type the questions right now. This is how my wife thinks. This is like what I do for work. Anyways, type your questions right now, and then make sure that we get them in. We'll get back to you. If not immediately after, Yaroslav is going to be hanging out with us for a bit. We'll follow up with you. Yaroslav, thank you so much for joining us today. It's always been so fun, and it's my pleasure.
Thank you. Bye.